You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
We're following up tonight on a local school district's decision to allow students to use the bathroom that matches their gender identity. Two families have pulled their kids out of Grass Lake schools because of that policy. They think it's too early to have these conversations with their kids. As Fox 47's Christopher Lane reports, one mom told them it's just easier to send them somewhere else.
My husband and I are taking action. We're not just going to talk about it because we're not going to stand for this.
Maureen Griffin came to the decision to pull her 5-year-old daughter out of Grass Lake schools with her husband earlier this week.
My husband and I felt that it was just not the right fit for our daughter. We have no problem with transgender people, but we do feel very uncomfortable with having children sharing the same bathroom of opposite sex.
But Nathan Triplett of Equality Michigan says the school made the right decision by allowing the transgender student to use the bathroom that he identifies with.
Opinions are one thing and everyone's entitled to their opinion, but when it comes to the district setting policy, they need to set policy based on what's in the best interest of all students.
Some parents don't think the decision is in the best interest of all students though, and that's why ones like Griffin are pulling their kids.
For me, it's really difficult to have her watching an older girl go into the boys' bathroom because she's very impressionable. She's 5.
Triplett doesn't think people should have to stay in the district if they're uncomfortable, but he thinks the district's first priority is to look at what's best for the school as a whole.
I'm not going to tell any parent what the right decision it is for them to make about their own child's educational situation. If there are some parents that feel like their child would be better educated elsewhere, that's certainly their prerogative, but the district's priority has to be to provide a learning environment that is safe and secure for everyone, which is what they've done in this situation.
And a Boise family is pulling their daughter out of school over concerns about a transgender student.
Now, the parents say school administrators gave the teen a choice of which bathroom to use. Glenn Beebe tells us why the family says that is not acceptable. He has our top story.
The family says they worry about their daughter's safety and say they didn't find out about this until last week. And they say they want the school to consider alternatives. Pauline Adams and Jacob Smith say they were upset to find out from their daughter and not the school district that a transgender student is using the girls' restroom. They believe that's not appropriate.
We would not allow our child to share a restroom with someone of the opposite sex simultaneously at home. So why would we be okay with it at school?
Smith says the student was born a boy but identifies and dresses as a girl. After not getting the response she hoped for from the school, Adams says she made the choice to remove her child from classes. She worries it will go beyond just restrooms.
When does it go to the locker rooms? Are you going to be okay with this? Are we going to let our school district make these decisions without asking us, informing us, any of that? No, it's not okay.
We tried to contact the district to ask about their policy on these issues, and they sent us a statement which says, the Office of Civil Rights has informed all schools that they must provide access to the facility of the transgendered student's choice. Adams and Smith say they believe this student truly is a girl other than her anatomy and admit the teen probably already feels ostracized. They say a unisex bathroom could be a solution for everyone. During our interview, they often cited safety and privacy as their main concerns, but I asked them why that isn't an issue for those who already use the facilities.
Some people might say, this doesn't seem like a big issue. Everyone has their own stall. Everyone has privacy.
And I've heard a lot of that same response, but this isn't just setting a rule for this one kid. This is also allowing, if a female chose to go to school that thought she should be a boy, this is also allowing her to choose to use the men's room. Now, there is not nearly as much privacy in the men's room.
Adams and Smith say they plan to keep their daughter out of school until something is changed. They've also considered moving to a different school.
Born as a boy, 6-year-old Coy is being raised as a little girl.
As we kept cutting her hair and getting her boys' clothes and boys' toys, she sunk into a deeper depression.
Doctors say Coy is transgendered. Physically, he's a boy, but emotionally identifies as a girl. His family is fighting to allow him to use the girls' bathroom at his school in Fountain.
We would rather have a happy child who's true to herself, than not have a child at all.
Coy isn't alone.
We all have a gender identity.
For the first 42 years of his life, Matt Cayley lived as a woman. Yet he knew at age 10 he was different.
You really don't have a choice. You can't make it go away.
Now a professor of transgendered studies at Metropolitan State, Cayley says it's not uncommon for a young child such as Coy to identify with the other gender, even at a very young age.
Gender identity is determined, as far as we know, in the brain, and in most cases it sort of matches with the body, but in many cases that we have seen, it is not.
Cayley says it's difficult to say how often this happens, but acknowledges early intervention is important as the suicide rates are high among transgendered children.
But first, hundreds show up as a school board takes on transgender education in the classroom.
If this draws these types of crowds, right there, case in point. This is a controversial topic that is inappropriate for 5-year-olds.
A Rockland Academy teacher was reading books on transgender identity in a kindergarten classroom while one of her students was transitioning. Good evening, I'm Sam Shane.
And I'm Christina Janes. New tonight, CBS 13's Sharon Roger joins us live now in Rockland with more on tonight's school board vote on policy changes going forward. Sharon?
Sam and Christina, this issue has garnered so much attention they had to move the school board meeting to this ballroom here where more than 500 people showed up. Dozens couldn't even get in. Now we still don't have a vote. After hours, public comment is still going on. And it's not just folks that are upset with the school board. There's a lot of support tonight for this teacher and this transgender child at the center of all this.
I want to be the one that teaches my kids about these controversial issues, not the school. I'm the parent. I know what's best for my kids.
They all have their own differences, and they need to be accepted, and their peers need to understand this.
For hours, emotional pleas to the Rockland Academy School Board from the LGBTQ community and parents on both sides of the controversial topic of gender identity and how it's discussed in the classroom.
So this was alarming at the young age, and that it was outside of the curriculum, and there was no notice given.
I think it's unacceptable for people to be bullying a child, because they don't like their life choices.
This all stems from a June incident inside a Rockland Academy charter school where a teacher read 2 books, including I Am Jazz, on what it means to be transgender to her kindergarten class. The book, according to the school, was not only age appropriate, but part of the California Department of Education's recommended reading list and given to the teacher by a transgender student in the process of transitioning. Some parents said their children were left traumatized and confused, yet others...
I had a daughter who happened to be in that classroom. This has been an opportunity for her to learn about some topics that I at least would not have had the courage to address with her.
This is not about burning books. This is not about burning literature. It's about having the right to opt out.
Administrators are now recommending a change in the parent handbook that would suggest that the school will endeavor to notify parents about controversial topics being discussed.
Endeavor to notify is too loose, in my opinion. Who is accountable for that? What will we be notified of?
It's impossible to say that every controversial topic, the teacher is going to be able to give a heads up ahead of time, because that's just not how classrooms work.
Now again, back here live, we are still waiting a vote tonight. We are still trying to figure out if they'll be making any changes to this policy. What we do know is even if they choose to notify parents, those parents will still not be able to opt out. And since this incident, at least 14 families have pulled their children from this school.
Applause upon applause, speaker after speaker. Hours of passionate testimony, all focused on one key question. What is and isn't an appropriate lesson in a kindergarten classroom?
The school spent a lot of time since these concerns were raised, meeting with parents.
The issue stems from a lesson on what it means to be transgender. After a kindergarten student at Rockland Academy Gateway, born a boy, was reintroduced to her class as a transgender girl back in June. Her teacher read the class 2 books about being transgender. The lesson was done without parents or administrators being notified.
They didn't understand why parents weren't notified beforehand.
Parents should be notified when this controversial issues arise.
This teaching left many children confused, frightened, and questioning their own gender.
Since then, a wave of backlash against the school by some parents. But in response to that backlash, major support for the teacher's decision. Ankur Dewan's daughter was in the classroom for that lesson.
The honest answer is I would not have had the courage to have this conversation with my daughters had this not been introduced at school. And so I think from that perspective, it's been an important lesson.
That support well beyond the classroom to the transgender community as a whole.
That it's not controversial amongst the LGBT community simply to be who you are. It is controversial, however, to deny another's human identity and their dignity.
I'm glad that there are people coming out to support the school, the family, the child.
Pam Douglas was one of many who supported the transgender lesson. She says doing otherwise is simply intolerant.
At the crux of it, it's sad. I mean, it's bigotry. Plain and simple, it's bigotry.
The school board now considering 5 recommendations, among them making it mandatory to notify parents about controversial topics beforehand, continuing to allow teachers to introduce age-appropriate books outside the curriculum, and not letting parents opt their kids out of lessons they find inappropriate.
And now, meanwhile tonight, school board members are voting after controversy in the classroom, all after a transgender kindergartner in Rockland shared a book with classmates.
Listen to this. That book was called I Am Jazz. It is the story of a real-life transgender girl named Jazz Jennings. According to the Rockland Family Academy of Schools, that book was acceptable under policy.
But some parents were angry they were not notified beforehand or given the choice to opt out. Tonight, the Rockland Family Academy of Schools heard from the public and will vote keeping or changing the policy on acceptable books. ABC 10's Irene Cruz was at the meeting tonight. Hey, Irene, what was the atmosphere like there?
Well, listen, Chris, it was a very heated discussion. The room was packed to full capacity. There were hundreds of people who came out, and we even had people who were waiting outside the building just to be let in. And during public comments, some people came out to show their support of the transgender kindergartner and the LGBTQ community. Meantime, some parents were angry about the incident, saying the school board isn't allowing parents to be involved. Some saying they prefer to teach their children about controversial topics in their own home and on their own terms. Here are a few people who stood before the school board tonight with opposing views.
The cycle of fear and hatred of people that are those others who aren't like me, that cycle has to be broken somewhere. And I think the best place for that process to start is with our youngest children, so that they don't ever learn, to hate.
There should be an opt-out procedure in there by me, able to know from the teachers what is going on in the classroom. We receive emails about parking and everything under the sun. This shouldn't be an issue. We should receive emails. We should receive something from them.
Now, comments have been split online as well. Earlier tonight, I posted this topic on my Facebook page. Joyce writes, parents should be notified so they can opt out their child out if they don't want him or her exposed to this topic in kindergarten. Chris writes, I think anything that helps children grow into non-bigoted, tolerant adults is great. It helps them be more accepting. There is nothing risque or sexual about this book. And meantime, we are still waiting to hear the result of that vote on whether the policy on literature choices will change, if parents will be notified prior to controversial topics in class, or if an opt-out option will be available for those parents.
Here's the first thing you see when visiting the Rockland Academy Gateway website, a fact sheet on gender identity. The topic became front and center last night as hundreds filled the charter school board meeting to capacity.
If the school had to notify us for every little thing that they think might be controversial, we would have a permission slip coming home every day.
The deeply divided conversation started with the introduction of I Am Jazz, a book brought into a kindergarten class by a transgender student who could identify with the transgender character in the book.
Parents wanted to be given a heads up when controversial topics are going to come up in the classroom. The school has said they'll endeavor to do that. They changed their policies last night to say they'll endeavor to do that.
I'd say that the potential fallout is still building.
The California Department of Education explained today that it's up to each individual district to decide how to discuss gender identity topics in the classroom, and current policy allows parents to opt out of sex ed lessons, not gender identity. The state would only get involved when there's a formal complaint for discrimination.
With something like this that could potentially cause a lot of families to leave, you'd think they'd maybe consider that as a setback. I would say I have heard a lot of people considering it, my family included.
School spokesperson Elizabeth Ashford told us how many have decided to take that next step.
So far, we've had 14 families and I believe 23 children leave the school citing this as the reason.